Thank you for watching this video. I'm going to describe a short article that myself, Gregor Misiaszek, and Kai Rodrigues did in Teaching in Higher Education Journal, which is asking what are some critical questions, 6 of them to be precise, on environmental aspects within higher education, within teaching, but also within research. Our article's name is 6 Critical Questions for Teaching Justice-Based Environmental Sustainability, JBES, in Higher Education. Now, this article came out in January 2023, and it coincides with a special issue that Kai and myself did on higher education teaching of environmentally just sustainability, also in teaching in higher education. And the authors interacted with our article with our 6 questions in our analysis. And the special issue came out with 10 different articles and also 2 wonderful points of departure, which are smaller articles. So before going into the 6 questions, these questions are supposed to be kind of the groundings, the foundations of questions. These aren't all the questions, but they should be reinvented. And we argue that they're essential questions, but there's also additional essential questions. But we argue that these are definitely needed to be asked when we're teaching in higher education, but also the aspects of research. 1, and also 2, is this aspect of how do higher education professors, staff, and so on teach to define, frame, question, measure, and prioritize or deprioritize sustainability in all of higher education, not just in environmental classes or designated environmental classes, and also the same aspect of how do we teach to define, to frame development. And when we talk about sustainability, where are we focusing our attention to? What societies? What aspects of nature? And all these different questions, especially when we're bringing in the contested trains of globalizations. Where do we put the sustainability baseline, and where do we position that balance? And the same thing with development. How do we define development? Development for who? Is it development with a larger D, meaning dominant? Is it guided by neoliberalism? Does it prioritize economic labor justice? If it does focus on economics, does it focus on justice aspects and also sustainability aspects beyond human beings? Does it deprioritize planetary sustainability, meaning all of nature and us as humans as part of that? And is it only guided by globalizations from above? And development with the lowercase d that we're hoping that most of teaching goes towards, it's very much opposite of that. And these are just some of the different examples. The third question is, what is the politics of sustainability, unsustainability in higher education? What are both the politics of or from higher education and upon higher education from society on how do we teach sustainability, development, environmentalism, and so on? And this overall aspect of JBES. The assumption of eco-pedagogy is that all humans carry out environmentally harmful acts to benefit someone or to benefit some population. Without any benefits, we wouldn't be doing harmful environmental violence to nature, to the rest of nature. We wouldn't be drilling into the ocean's bottoms unless there was some sort of resource on the bottom, which is oil, which has its own problems, of course. But the key question with eco-pedagogy or critical pedagogy or aspects of how myself and Kai argue that environmental sustainability has to be taught in higher education is problematizing for students to be able to read who benefits, who pays, and who suffers from human actions that are harmful to the environment. And 2 important notations: it doesn't mean that the intentions of what we do is always bad. Sometimes it just ends up that way, unfortunately. And also there's a continuum of actions between turning on a light switch, turning on a computer, or mountaintop removal for coal and other resources. So going into the fourth question, it's this aspect of what is the politics influences upon and from higher education, but the fourth is, what other responsibilities do we have within higher education and teaching for our roles, responsibilities within the public spheres, including the planetary sphere beyond human beings? And it's this aspect of how do we reproduce ideologies, understandings, and also cultural understandings? And what does transformation look like in our teaching? What do we need to do? What are we responsible for? And how can we disrupt long-held structures in higher education that doesn't bring in aspects such as transdisciplinary education? More of this aspect of the image to the right of siloed teaching, siloed disciplines and departments and schools and so on in higher education. How does aspects of faculty teaching loads, for example, factor in on all these different aspects? And also this aspect of funding, research funding that very much, even though it's designated research funding, a lot of times that very much factors in the funding of an overall department, initiatives of a university. So these are just some of the questions. So the last two questions together, one is this aspect of how do we teach environmental unsustainability, sustainability? What epistemologies do we use? These aspects of using Southern theory, of aspects of Northern, or epistemologies of North, epistemologies of South, and also indigenous knowledges, theories. How do we form knowledges historically, and that goes into current aspects, and what ways of knowing? And the second one is this aspect that how can we counter anthropocentric teaching, or how can we teach towards countering the anthroposphere? And do we do that in higher education? So it's this aspect of between how do we distance ourselves from the rest of the planet, the rest of Earth? How do we distance this aspect of us versus them? And the them can be the rest of nature also. How can we counter socio-historical oppressions, such as othering, racism, neocoloniality, xenophobia, Orientalism, heteronormativity, the citizen versus a non-citizen? How can we counter distancing that comes from geographic aspects? Well, at least it's happening to them and not us. It's happening over there, way over there, and not over here. Epistemologically, what knowledges do we bring in? And understandings, and what knowledges do we not? Time-wise, well, at least it's happening in the distant future. And also this aspect of how do we use language, and deconstructing that with linguistics and eco-linguistics. That's very much necessary. So how do we distance ourselves, but more so, how can we de-distance ourselves from the rest of nature? And looking at it once again through that fifth question of epistemologies of the South, North, indigenous knowledges, and so on. How do we define development? How do we teach to frame development? What knowledges do we bring in? With upper and lower case of all these, dominated the uppercase, lowercase is this aspect of using diversity of languages, of knowledges, of ways of knowing, of theories, of pedagogies, and so on. What sciences do we use? How do we use technologies? How do we define sustainability? And also in more technical aspects, things like farming. Are we advocating for things such that's going towards corporate chemical farming, or are we going towards aspects of, say, permaculture? So these are just some of the questions, and they all coincide with one another, of course. Thank you again for watching this video. You can get the article at the Teaching in Higher Education Journal website, and you can always ask myself and Kai any questions by emailing us or visiting our websites. Thank you again.